What's going on, and welcome back to another less than 5 minute gear review. And in this video we're going to be going over the Idogear vehicle visor panel. Now these guys are going to cost you roughly around 20 bucks a piece, and I absolutely think they are worth the money, especially if you work in and around vehicles. Now, for a company that isn't very well known from what it seems like and kind of dabbles in between the airsoft and the tactical industry, this thing is very well thought out and put together in my opinion, and I highly recommend it. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, comparing a lot of products that were out on the market, and when I found this, I was pretty much sold on it right away because of everything that it had to offer. With that, there are some things that I do think you need to think about when it comes to visor panels. You have one side or just one-sided visor panels where you only have one side of workable space, and then you have two-sided where you have two sides of workable space. This is an example of two-sided, and I'll get into that in a little bit so that way you can better understand what I'm talking about with that. My recommendation when it comes to these is go with something two-sided because it maximizes that space above you for mission essential information, whether you're law enforcement or military, license and registration. You can throw notebooks, pens, pencil, paper, maps. You can do a lot with this thing in conjunction with a bunch of additional equipment that you can run on here between the MOLLE and the Velcro that's on here. So with that, I'm going to dive right into this, and then I'll show you kind of a little bit of a setup so that way you can better understand what's going on with this. So with that, this is going to be your Velcro and MOLLE side. You have Velcro up top here, and then you have your elastic loops on both sides of this to be able to throw pens, pencils, and all of that, markers in those loops. And then you have your MOLLE. So if you want to add patches to this, or I shouldn't say patches, but pouches, you can throw those on here and add those to that MOLLE section, depending on how you want to set things up and configure it. The other cool thing with this is you can throw phone cases and or configure a system to be able to hold your phone, so then that way you can run your phone, whether you're running ATAC, CivTac, or you just want to use GPS. You have the ability to do that on this side. Flipping it over, you have your pocket side. So my recommendation with this is run your maps and then run your license, registration, any type of mission data cards that you want to take out with you. You can throw those in there, so it gives you the ability to run a lot of administrative stuff and navigation stuff on this side. In conjunction with that, you do have 3 additional elastic loops. Interior of this, pretty simple and straightforward. You have 3 Velcro straps to be able to wrap that around your visor and properly secure that to your visor. Take the time when it comes to this piece, make sure it's nice and tight so that way things don't fall off and hit you or your passengers. So with that, when it comes to a little bit of setup, and one thing that I do want to talk about with these is just kind of how much space you're working with. When it comes to this backside or back pocket, I would throw your large scale maps, and then the front I would throw your smaller scale maps, so pretty much cities and the immediate area that you live in or work in, and then throw the country and surrounding state maps on the back side. You can fit about 6 maps in this comfortably. I have about 5 in there right now, and it's pretty close to that max capacity. So flipping it over, you do have quite a bit of options when it comes to setting this up. Some recommendations, especially based off some experience that I have in the past, is depending on the visor panels, if you're using visor panels, to set these up to where both the driver and the TC can see them and be able to reference the information that's on there. So if you build something like a Loom board, whether you have pre-printed stuff that you can just reference right off this, or you leave it blank so that way you can write everything in, have that Loom board on the interior of the vehicle, so that way if this is the driver's side, you can see the Loom board on that side. If you're on the TC side or the vehicle commander side, it's flipped around, so then that way the driver can reference that material as well. More often than not, when it comes to dismounts and all of that, your driver is always going to stay with the vehicle, and then everybody else can dismount minus like the gunner. So that's talking more military side. Law enforcement, it's a lot different scenario, but with that, I'm speaking more on the military side of things. Definitely have those Loom cards and data cards set up so that way both driver and TC. If you're law enforcement, I would do the same thing anyways, because it seems to be more often than not nowadays law enforcement is going to work in a pair. So you have 2 officers per vehicle. That way they can both reference all of that material and not have to try and like crank over the seats and the center consoles to try and get the information that they need. So when it comes to setting up things on the MOLLE, like I said, you can set this up a lot of different ways for phones, GPSs, all of that. For the TC side, the driver side, it just kind of depends on what specific equipment you may want to add on top of this. For me, and what I have on this guy is just a small signal flare gun, so that way when it comes to signaling and getting somebody's attention from really far off, you have the ability to do that. This is just kind of an example, but real world military kind of application, there were plenty of times that the drivers would have their own versions of strobes and flare guns or signaling devices, so that way they had the ability to communicate from one vehicle to the next if we were really spread out. A lot of that was more contingency and emergency based kind of scenario stuff, but with that you do have some options. And then with these elastic loops, like I said, just throwing some markers and pens, pencils, whatever, I would highly recommend throwing all that in there. So you can fit 2 of these comfortably on each side, and then just make sure you get both top and bottom, so that way everything is secure and snug and isn't going to fly around in the event of a rollover or accident. So with that, I really don't have anything else when it comes to these guys. These things are awesome when it comes down to it. I highly recommend them. So I wanted you to see what this thing is all about, how it's kind of set up and configured as well, and then give you just an example of a base or a guideline, so that way you can set these up based off of what you have going on for your mission, operational environment, and duty position. So with that, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. We'll answer any questions that you have. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.